So hold on while we get that up, and I hope nobody calls me today. Okay, the link's in the chat. Just check it out and be sure that we are still, we are always streaming. And at this point in time, please, I would appreciate it if you turn on your videos. So that's how I know if my network is glitchy, so I can quickly fix it. Okay. And we'll pray after this class, and our prayer is going to be, God, please let us get past the stage where we keep talking about turning on cameras and turning off cameras. And whoever doesn't turn on their camera, or whoever turns off their camera the most, is the person who's going to lead us in that 30 minutes intercessory prayer session. Okay, that's by the way. So let's get started with what we have today. So like I was talking about methods, and I said it's very important that you understand what methods are and why they actually exist. So I came up with a couple of definitions or explanations to actually help that sink in properly. But in general, like, can anybody just give an attempt on that, on defining those concepts, what an object is and what a method is, or what a method is basically, and what a function is, or you can try any of them. Just say what you know about them. Quickly. And now the cameras are turned off. I'm very sure some people are not even in front of their computers.
Oh,
How can I be so sure? Okay. So is anybody going to attempt that? Or no idea? Just try, please. Hello?
And what are we attempting?
Like what a method is and what a function is, from what we learned.
What?
A method and a function.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
A method and a function. Is it hard?
Okay.
sir, my knowledge about method and function, I don't know, it's not really clear because on the V3 schools, they were like methods too are like also function, are also known as functions, and then functions now like it's a variable that you can put other variables inside. That's what I could get from the recap of the last class.
Mm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's you actually right in terms of the fact that methods are basically functions, and you said functions are variables that you can put other variables inside. Mm,
No, that's what we are like from my own understanding
it's fine,
because
and it's very
when
important that you say things from your point of view, so I'll actually know what to clarify. So basically, what a function is, and before we start going into this whole concept, we'll come back to a couple of things that we did last week like during the last class, so everything can be clearer. But a function basically is just another data type, and the difference between the function and every other data type is that the function can actually, is a data type that actually is a program. So basically, it's more like you have some set of instructions that you want the computer to carry out. So you store those set of instructions in the form of a data, and you store it in a variable. Remember, a variable is nothing but a box. So the function is just another content that you can store inside of that box. And unlike numbers, strings, boolean values, and so on, you know, a function actually gives you a lot of, a lot of, it gives you a lot of power, because you are not just storing one data inside of the variable. you are now storing a program that is able to produce dynamic data over and over time all over your program. Does that make sense? So the function is just another data type. But the difference between that data type and every other data type is that this one now, the value of that data type is a program. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And a program basically is just some set of instructions or statements that a computer should carry out whenever you invoke that function or you call that function. You can also put it that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so basically a method is pertaining to an object. So a method, remember I said about objects that objects are always always contain properties, and the properties are always in pairs. So we have a property and then we have a value. That's what makes up property value pairs rather. So that's what makes up the composition of an object. So we have a property on the left side, then we have the value for that property on the right hand side. So it's more like if you have an object. So let's just start that by creating a whole new kind of object, and this file becomes bigger and bigger. Or should we just delete everything in the file? Since we are no longer, I'm not actually sharing the file, I'm just writing in it. Should I delete it?
So I think you should share
Oh,
the file. Just share it to us, then you can delete it.
Okay, no problem. I'll do that. Okay. I actually said I was going to download Brave browser. I forgot. So let me just start downloading that. Start downloading that so that I can switch over, because I'm tired of seeing that error in Chrome. Okay, so let's create a new object and let's use let not const. So let's say the object name is car. So remember the normal way we declare JavaScript variables. So this is basically another variable that we are storing. So we are creating a box and we are now trying to put some value in the box, and the value we are putting in the box is basically an object. So you can see here that we have an object. So before we just go on, remember last week I talked about instance properties and static properties, and I said something about instance property and I said something else about static properties. And can anybody remind me what I said about both of them? Hello? Hello?
Shadi. Sure.
Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry with you.
I was asking a question. I know you are here. Thank you, Brave. Okay, nobody has an answer. Okay, so let's just quickly go over that. So I will do a console.log the car, and you see we get something in the console, and that's just basically it's more like an empty bullet shell, that has nothing inside of it. So we have an object, we've not declared any property inside of the object, so we have a blank object, and you can actually see that in the console we have an arrow beside the object itself, letting us know that we can actually expand this to see more things that it contains. So if I expand it, we see something called prototype, and when I expand the prototype, we see a lot of functions, because the F, whenever you see this F, it actually tells you that all of these are functions. So basically these are default properties that comes with every JavaScript object that you create. You don't have to add these properties by yourself. They just get created the moment you create an object. They come in, like, they get shipped together with your object to your browser. Does that make sense? So these properties that you did not create but that JavaScript kind of bestows your object with by default are called static properties. Because if I was going to create a variable, another one, and I call this other one house, and I do the same thing, you'd realize that, and I do a console log for house as well, you realize that we have two objects looking identical, but by the time I expand this as well, I also see the same set of functions inside of the house, and this one is declared on tree, executed on tree 14, which means this line in our text editor, while this one is on tree 30. So you can actually see that these are the two objects. But before I start, adding any property to the object, JavaScript already added some default properties inside of a shell known as prototype. So this is basically the container for all of those default properties. And the word prototype is very familiar. I'm sure you are familiar with the word prototype. It's basically English language, right? So if I say I'm the manufacturer of a pen, and I say this pen in my hand is a prototype, what that means is that this is like a base type that every other type will be created from. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe I'll be saying praise the Lord or amen, so you respond with amen. Maybe maybe that'll be a different way to say hello, hallelujah, they say praise the Lord. Maybe we'll start going that route, because turn on your video so I can see that people are still on the call. Okay, so you can see the difference now. So the properties that I come here to declare, so let's say I come here and say, okay, I have a car object, and my car will definitely have a color, and I say the color of my car is red. So the moment I start doing this, then I start creating instance properties. So I'm creating properties for this particular instance of a JavaScript object. So the JavaScript object is the same across the language stack. Does that make sense? So, but by default, we have static properties on every object created. And those static properties are by default a part of that, that object. So the moment I start declaring these custom properties, those are the ones that myself as a developer create. So they are referred to as instance properties. The static ones are the ones that comes by default, while the instance ones are the ones that are pertaining to a particular instance of an object that you created. Does that make sense? Hello? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a car, then we can now say a model. And I can say the model is Mazda. Is it model or manufacturer? Let's see model. 323. If this was your dream car, you need a new dream. Okay, so this is it. So we now have our defined properties inside of here, but you see that the static properties still remain, right? Okay, network is bad on your end. Can somebody please verify and see if everything is okay on the YouTube side of things? Okay, so we have instance and static properties. So the
YouTube is working.
okay, thank you. So do you have the question, why do you have the prototype in the first place? That is those static properties that JavaScript just adds to your object by default. Why do you have it? Have you thought about that before? And it's not just on objects, we have it on most data types. Hello? If you've ever asked the question before. Okay, you haven't asked the question. Asked the question before. Okay, that means you didn't ask the question before. So the reason why you actually have that is because there are a lot of operations that you can actually perform on a particular data type as a result of what is available in the prototype. And these are methods basically. And what these methods do is that they help you, carry out some specific operations on that particular data. So just like the basic arithmetic operations we carry out on the number type, or the concatenation or interpolation operation we carry out on the string type, we also get to carry out some very high level operations on these non-primitive data types having their own objects. So other than the plus, minus, and or whatever, these default static properties actually makes available some, let me say, some operations that you can carry out on this data type. Does that make sense? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So I showed you an example of that last week when I created, a function inside of an object, and I say, let's say, costs, maybe the cost of producing this car is 200, and then the tax is 10. So I can now say market price, maybe M, and let me use an underscore. So market price will definitely be tax plus cost, right? So instead of trying to find that out, because we can have a different instance of this particular car object, and we'll come to that when we start getting to the subject of object constructors and so on. But for now, I can actually perform a quick operation on this object if I make a method available, and I want to get I would say max price, and I won't do anything to that yet. Let me go down and say get price, and get price basically is going to be a function. So I declare a function, and I say the function is going to just basically add the cost, which in this case will be undefined, plus the tax together. So it is going to return the addition of both of them. So whenever I need to get the cost of a car, I just say, the price of a car, just say car dot get price. And when I call it, definitely I will get an error because end price is not defined. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so let me say this will be cost. So let me just pass that as an leave that as a parameter. So this is going to be tax. So here I'm going to just call get price, or let me just call get price. And get price is going to, we are going to add costs, and then we are going to add tax, and nothing will happen. I will still get an error. So get price is not defined, so I need to use the this keyword, because whenever you use the this keyword, you refer to this particular instance of an object. So I will talk about the this keyword in a moment, but I just want to show you what a method can do for you. So we have here, and I need to use the this keyword here too. This that cost and this that tax. Okay, so let me comment this out basically. So when we have this, and I say okay, so this is by default. So I think this is a perfect way of me doing this for you. So by default, let's say this is just any car, and then this is basically, let's remove the model as well. So please somebody check if YouTube is still working. I think somebody just called me now. Can you just check YouTube, please? Okay, so I can say here that okay, so you can see what is happening here, that I can say car dot get price, and I pass in the price from the outside. So because I already have a function declared as a prop.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you can see what is happening here. So this is more like the perfect example I have to give in this instance. So I have a car, and I have a manufacturer. There's no model, so I actually want to know what is the price of this car. So instead of having to write the price, so that I'll be able to create different instances of this particular object's price, which is the car object, I created a method which is this getPrice method, which is basically a function. So whenever a function is the value of an object's property, you refer to that as a method, right? It's not just a regular property now, it is a method. Does that make sense? And that method basically is meant for you to operate on that object in order for you to be able to get a value relating to something about that object. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense? Okay, I'll give another example. So let's say here, I have another object that says myself, and myself, I have a first name, and let me use this. My first name is Ololade, and then my last name, so I can have a method that says get full name. You get the point? So this is going to be a function, and then the function is going to just basically add first name and last name and then return the value. So it's going to add this dot first name plus. So if I come here, let me just remove this, and I do a console, sorry. Get full name. Sorry, I'm supposed to do myself.get full name, right? If you are following, can you see now that I have? Can you see that it actually returns my full name and it doesn't look so good? So let me just add, a space in between them. So you can see. So basically, I'm able to just get my full name instead of writing my full name as part of this, maybe like saying full name, then I don't forget my point. So a method just gives you the freedom to be able to carry out specific operations on your object. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, sir.
And it's not just on your object. There are different kinds of methods. We have global methods in JavaScript that's not just pertaining to a particular object, but to the global object that you can use anywhere. And one of those types is even this console.log. Let me surprise you to actually write something like window.console.log, and you see I still get the same result. That's because console.log is a method that is available on the window object, and the window object is basically your entire browser. If I do a console.log window, you actually see that the window object actually does exist, and it is a very big one. You see most of the methods we've used before, like alert and so on, are actually on the Windows object. They don't come out of thin air. They are pertaining to one other object. Does that make sense? So that's just by the way. You don't have to think about that too much. And let me remove the Windows of console.log. So because we are always in a global space, we can always call console.log. So this is what methods and what JavaScript methods do for you basically. So they kind of perform some set of operations on your object depending on how you define them. So now for us to be able to make the most of our JavaScript data types, more like objects or arrays, we have to be able to access the different methods they have in them and be able to use these methods to our advantage. Does that make sense? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
It does. Eh? Hello? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
So let's go on. So first of all, let's go over the various data types we declared at the beginning. So we had our string, then we had our number, then we had boolean, we had And then we are not going to be listing all of them. We're just going to be listing the ones that want to be trying their methods today. So there are basic operations you can perform. We have what's it called? Object. So basically what we are going to be doing is we'll look at the string the string type, and then we'll look at some basic methods that are available on the string type. Does that make sense? And in order for you to be able to access many of these string types, you can actually go to W, just to practice around and play around it. W3 schools. String methods. And remember what I said initially, because if you've been following, you should actually notice the fact that I told you that primitive data types don't have their own methods, right? I said that. Didn't I say that? Hello? Does anybody remember me saying that? I said that, right? Hello?
So I did not hear that part. So network went bad.
Okay, I mentioned initially that primitive data types like string, numbers don't actually have methods because they hold a single value. They don't have a prototype. You get? So there are no methods available on them. I mentioned
Yes,
that.
sir.
I mentioned that. So I said that there's actually a solution. There's a reason why we can do string dot to uppercase, that there's something else at work. It is not just the string. You remember? Hello. So I talked about auto boxing and I told you to research around it. Did anybody do that? Hello. I'll start calling your names. Laura, did you do that?
Sir, my network is very bad. I can hardly hear you. Like, I'm just hoping that the replay will help me because I don't understand anything that has been going on.
Yeah. Sorry. Precious, what about you? Did you? Eh?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I don't know. My network is breaking too. Honestly, the network has been breaking.
Okay. Let me go again.
I don't know.
Okay, let me go again. Here's what I said. I said during the last class, I told you that this primitive
Now I
data
can't
type-
hear you. Like your voice is breaking. That's why it has been bad. Managing.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, but for those of you who can hear me, how far? Remember what I said about primitive data types not having their own inherent methods. And I said there's a solution to that in JavaScript. And I said that solution is basically auto boxing of this primitive